All right, guys. Something I wanted to go over with y'all today. Starting off with some theology, some Christianity. Um, Going over the book of Nehemiah right now, as well as Genesis, like I mentioned before. But going over Nehemiah, um, yeah, it's such an interesting book because part of it talks about how God is slow to anger, and that specific verse really stood out to me. Also, sorry, I have my retainer on, so if you hear a slight lisp, that's what it is. Uh, But yeah, it was such an amazing verse for me to read this morning because it reminded me that like God is obviously slow to anger, as the verse suggests. But what that means for us is if God, who is all knowing, all loving, who is this amazing creator, is slow to anger, how much more then should we be slow to anger? In other words, if God truly understands the weight of our sin, like that's a pretty remarkable thing for him to be slow to anger. Because when people commit sins against themselves or against other people, we oftentimes get angry. And I obviously like, understandably. But what's crazy is that we don't sometimes even truly understand the gravity of their sin to the fullest extent that God does. And yet God, who understands it more than we do, is probably hurt more than we are because he loves us more than we could love anyone. He still is slow to anger in spite of all of that. So that leads me back to my original point. How much more should we be slow to anger? How much more should we be patient with others and with ourselves? So, yeah, that's just a little nugget that I picked up while I was reading this morning. Good stuff.